Okay, so another Spitfire. This one is a little bit later than the previous one that we've seen. This one's a Spitfire Mark V. These aircraft came into service in 1941, so a little bit after the Battle of Britain. By this stage of the war, we're trying to be a little bit more offensive rather than just sitting around waiting for the Germans to come over here and drop bombs on us. We started trying to get over to Europe, and Fighter Command especially was engaged in encouraging the Germans to come up into the air and fight. So this was done largely by sending out quite a small number of bombers, had huge amounts of fighters packed around them, and by doing this, having the bombers there, the Germans have to come up and try and do something about it. So that gets them into the air and engages them in combat. Now that was being done by aircraft such as this, the Spitfire Mark V. Another aircraft which actually seen operations during the war, seen active service during the war. As you can see, it's got the black and white stripes on it. Perfectly okay for this aeroplane to carry those because it actually flew in the air at the time of D-Day, flew a number of patrols over the D-Day beaches. And the aircraft was in service prior to that as well in 1942. It was in service at the time of the Dieppe raid, which was really sort of a sounding thing to lead up to the actual invasion of Europe. Not very successful, but anyway, it took place. And this aircraft flew a number of patrols over those D-Day beaches, as well as the D-Day beaches. So again, an aeroplane which has been involved in combat, accounted for enemy aircraft. But also you'll notice that by this time we've got the two great big things sticking out the front of the wing, so by now we've got 20mm cannon in the aeroplane, so it's a much more heavily armed aeroplane. And also this particular version's got the 4 303-inch machine gun. So after the invasion had taken place, this particular aeroplane was taken out of service as a frontline fighter, and it was used to train pilots to fly Spitfires. Now, in order to do that, it was based up in the north of Lincolnshire, a place called RF Hibblestone, which is still there today. It's used as a parachuting centre these days. But Hibblestone was and is an all-grass airfield. Now, to taxi around on an all-grass airfield with an aeroplane with a tail wheel at the back, grass isn't nice and smooth like tarmac or concrete, so they can bounce around quite a bit. If there's a little bit of wind about as well, then that can get caught under the tail. The Spitfire's a nose-heavy aeroplane anyway, so wind under the tail, bouncing around, heavy nose, crunch. So they used to try to stop these sorts of accidents happening. So what they would do, if there was enough wind about, they would get a member of the ground crew, as the aircraft was taxiing up to its takeoff point, they would take some members of the ground crew, you and you, sit on the tail, and you keep it nice and firmly on the ground while it taxis off to the takeoff. So, on this particular day, Valentine's Day 1945, a young lady by the name of Margaret Horton is walking along, and there's a section of Spitfires which are starting to go off on a training circuit. Led by this aeroplane, which is flown by an experienced pilot, the instructor leading off these trainees to go off on this training mission. So she was walking along as these aeroplanes were starting up, and she thought, a bit windy, I'll go and sit on the tail. So she volunteered herself to go and sit on the tail. Now, unfortunately, the order hadn't gone out, go and sit on the tail. So she was there completely of her own will. So she sat there on the tail. Somebody very important doesn't know that she's there. The man in the cockpit. So when he goes taxiing off up to the takeoff point, she's sitting there quite happily bouncing along. When he gets to the takeoff point, normally he would pause and wait for her to jump off. He didn't know that she was there, so he didn't bother pausing, throttle forward, aeroplane takes off. So initially she would have been sitting there quite happily as it bounces along, but then as the speed increases and the tail lifts, she must have thought, whoops. By this stage it's too late for her to jump off the aeroplane, going too fast. So the only thing that she could do was to wrap herself around the fin. So her body went round that side, her legs were around here, and she's hanging on to this bit of the back. That controls whether the aeroplane goes up or down. So she was hanging on to it very tightly. She was hanging on to it so tightly that she was pulling it up. Now the aeroplane, when it took off, not only is she pulling it up, but her weight at the back of the aeroplane, which is making it tail heavy. So when the aeroplane got into the air, it climbed a little bit more steeply than it would normally. So unless the pilot does anything about that, it's going to stall and crash. So he's an experienced pilot, he knew what to do. Control column forward, get the nose down, get a bit more speed, stays in the air. So gets up a little bit higher. Still the aeroplane feels a bit funny, but he carries on. By this stage she thinks, I don't think he knows I'm here. So she thought to herself, I'll try and attract him to go banging on the fuselage or anything like that. Don't start waggling. So she started waggling and the aeroplane started going like that. So the pilot thinks, I've got a big problem now, I really can't control the aeroplane very well. So he got in touch with the people in air traffic. They had been watching all the time through their great big binoculars. They hadn't actually got in touch with him and told him, by the way, you've got a young lady on the back of the aeroplane, but if they had done, then he may have panicked and off she would have gone. So when he got in touch with them and said, I've got a problem with the control of my aeroplane, they said, yes, you have. But they didn't tell him what the problem was. Again, because if they did, off she would have gone. So they said, land the aeroplane as quickly and as gently as possible. So he continued round in the circuit, got the aeroplane nice and gently on the ground, and then as he was taxiing up to his parking spot, do not ask how this didn't happen before, her beret blew off. Now it's an offence to lose an article of clothing in the military, so she leapt off the aeroplane to go chasing after her beret. Consequently, when he parked the aeroplane, got out, nobody there, completely unaware that he'd been carrying this young passenger. So meanwhile, she retrieved her beret. What do we always do at times like this? A cup of tea. So she went chasing after a Salvation Army van for a cup of tea. Got her mug of tea. People in air traffic thought we better get an ambulance out to her, go and get her checked over, so they called up to an ambulance to go out and pick her up. So she sat there drinking her tea. The ambulance called up and they said, we're going to get you taken away. She said, all right, but let me finish the tea first. Anyway, she met up with the pilot a little later on, and so he says to her, put 10 minutes in your logbook. And he also told her that sometimes you had control, sometimes I had. He survived up until 5 years ago, so he had a nice story to tell people. He went to parties or dinner parties. She lived up until the early 2000s, and she occasionally used to come here and visit the airplane. Very lucky young lady.